I remember that evening with a clarity that hurts. There are some moments life refuses to let you forget, even when you try to tuck them away in quiet corners of your mind. This moment was one of them. It began like any ordinary evening, the kind where the house feels warm, the lights are dim, and the day winds down softly. I had just finished preparing dinner. Lentils, rice, and a little salad. Nothing special, just the usual comfort food. I placed the plates on the table and waited for my husband, Arif, to return from work. I even added a fresh piece of lemon the way he liked it, hoping maybe tonight he would notice the small effort. Marriage teaches you to celebrate even the tiniest gestures. It was raining outside. Not a heavy storm, just a soft, steady rain that touched the windows like quiet fingers. I always found peace in rain. It made the world feel slower, gentler. But that night, the rain felt different, almost like a warning. When Arif finally walked in, he looked tired, but not in the usual way. Not the long day at work tired. It was the tiredness of someone who has made a decision and is afraid to speak it out loud. He didn't remove his shoes right away. He didn't greet me warmly like he once used to. He just stood near the doorway for a few seconds, staring at the floor. I remember feeling a strange tightness in my chest, the kind you feel when your heart senses something your mind hasn't processed yet. "Dinner is ready," I said softly. But he didn't walk toward the dining table. Instead, he sat down on the sofa, elbows on his knees, hands folded together. His breathing sounded heavy, almost shaky. Something inside me whispered, "This is not a normal night." I walked toward him slowly. "Arif, are you okay?" He didn't answer immediately. He looked up at me, and that's when I knew. His eyes were different. He wasn't angry. He wasn't sad. He wasn't confused. He was resigned, like a man who had already left long before he spoke the words. "We need to talk," he finally whispered. Those 4 words can break a home more swiftly than any storm. I sat down across from him, my hands trembling but hidden in my lap. I told myself to breathe. I told myself to stay calm. I told myself that whatever he was about to say, I would survive it. He swallowed hard. Then he said the sentence that split my life in two. "I cannot do this anymore. This life without children." The room fell silent. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. He continued talking about how years had passed, how he felt incomplete, how his mother constantly reminded him that time was running out, how society looked at him with pity. He listed reasons as if trying to convince himself more than me. But I barely heard his words. My ears rang. My heart pounded in slow, painful beats. Childlessness. That was the weight between us. Not love, not loyalty, not companionship, just the absence of a child. He didn't accuse me directly, but the message sat between us like a shadow neither of us could ignore. I stared at him for a long moment, and then I did something even I did not expect. I smiled. A small, quiet, broken smile. Not because I was strong, not because I was calm, but because something inside me had gone numb. Completely numb. I did not beg him to stay. I did not defend myself. I did not explain the doctor visits, the medicines, the prayers, the nights I cried silently beside him. I just sat there and let the silence answer for me. He looked relieved when I didn't argue. Maybe that hurt the most. The relief on his face. Within an hour, he packed some clothes. I watched him fold his shirts, place them in a suitcase, look around the room one last time. This was the same room where we had dreamed of naming our future children, of painting the walls light blue or soft pink, of building a life that now felt like a story someone else had written. Before walking out, he paused by the door. "I hope you understand," he murmured. I nodded, not because I understood, but because I had no words left. When he stepped outside, the rain welcomed him, and the door closed softly, the kind soft that feels louder than a slam. For a long time, I stood in the middle of the empty room. The dinner had gone cold. The tea had lost its warmth. The house felt like a body that had lost its heartbeat. I put my hand on the table where his plate still sat untouched. Then I whispered to myself, "So this is how a life changes." I didn't cry that night. My tears came later, in quiet hours long after everyone expected them. But at that moment, I only felt one thing: a strange mixture of grief and release. I didn't know it then, but the life I was about to step into would be nothing like the one I was leaving behind. And somewhere far away from that small kitchen, two tiny heartbeats were already finding their way towards me, towards a mother who had no idea a miracle was quietly unfolding.
When I left my home after Arif walked away, I did not leave as a broken woman. Not completely. A part of me still believed life had something left to offer, even if I could not see it yet. But before I tell you about the city and about the man who entered my life later, I need to take you back to where I came from. I grew up in a small village tucked between gentle hills and quiet streams. Life there moved slowly, like an old man taking an evening walk. People knew each other's names, each other's stories, even each other's mistakes. It wasn't a perfect place, but it was home. My mother was a soft-spoken woman who carried wisdom the way some people carry jewelry, naturally, almost unknowingly. She believed every difficulty had a lesson and every blessing had a responsibility. Whenever life felt heavy, she would place her hand on my head and say, "Child, the heart that bends does not break." My father was the opposite: quiet, observant, a man of few words. He loved us through actions, fixing broken chairs, mending fences, bringing fruits from the market without being asked. He wasn't the kind of man who said, "I love you," but he showed it in the way he lifted heavy things so my mother didn't have to, or in the way he kept the house warm during harsh winters. Growing up, I believed love meant patience. Love meant small kindnesses. Love meant staying even when life tested you. Maybe that is why I clung to my marriage for so long, because leaving felt like failing the lessons my parents taught me. But life has its own ideas, its own timing. Early years of marriage. My marriage started like any other, with excitement, with hopes, with the kind of dreams newlyweds carry like precious glass. Arif and I weren't perfect, but in the beginning we were happy in our simple way. He would tease me while I cooked, I would wait for him by the window during evenings, and on some nights we sat outside in the courtyard and counted stars like children. Talk of children came early, not from him, not from me, but from the people around us. "That's how life works here," my mother once said with a tired smile. "When a girl marries, everyone waits for the sound of a baby." At first, we laughed it off, but laughter slowly turned into silence, and silence into discomfort. Year after year, month after month, doctor after doctor, answers never came. Some days I felt like a puzzle with one missing piece. Some days I felt like a question with no answer. And some days I felt nothing at all. Arif tried to be patient. He held my hand after disappointing tests. He hugged me when I cried in the bathroom late at night. But pain changes people, and the quiet pressure from society changes them even more. He began returning home later. He stopped talking about the future. He avoided conversations about family. And slowly, the bond that tied us began loosening like an old thread. He never said it out loud, but I could feel it. He blamed me. The day everything shifted. One particular evening, long before he left, I overheard him speaking to his sister on the phone. He said softly, "Maybe this marriage was not meant to be. How long do I wait?" Those words traveled through the thin walls of our house and straight into my heart. I stood in the hallway, holding a tray of tea that I had prepared for him. My hands shook so badly that the cups rattled. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell him I heard. I simply placed the tea on the table and pretended everything was normal. That is what women often do. Pretend nothing hurts, even when everything does. My parents' house. After he left me officially, I returned to my parents' house for a few weeks. My mother welcomed me at the door the way she did when I was a child who had fallen and scraped her knee. She pulled me into her arms and held me for a long time. Not one question, not one complaint, just love. My father took my suitcase without a word. He placed it in my old room and switched on the fan. It was his way of saying, "You are safe here." During the nights, my mother would sit beside me while I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she didn't, but her presence felt like a warm blanket over my shivering heart. One night, she said something I will never forget. "Daughter, life does not stop because someone walks away. Sometimes life begins exactly there." I didn't understand it then, but her words planted a seed inside me, a small seed of courage. The decision to leave the village. People in the village talked, of course. They whispered when I passed by. They pretended not to stare. They asked quiet questions they thought I could not hear. A divorce already? No child. What will happen to her now? Poor girl, so unlucky. Every word felt like a pebble thrown at a window already cracked. So I made a decision to step out of the environment that kept reminding me of my failure. I packed my clothes, I folded some photographs, and I told my parents I wanted to leave for the city for some time. My father looked at me carefully, as if reading my heart. Then he nodded once, just once, and that was his blessing. My mother hugged me tightly and whispered, "The world is bigger than your pain. Go and find your peace." And so, carrying a small suitcase, a tired heart, and a future I could not see yet, I boarded a bus at dawn and left the village behind. As the bus moved away, I watched the familiar roads fade. It felt like leaving my old life, the broken one, on those dusty streets. I had no idea what awaited me in the city. No idea that someone would enter my life again. No idea that my empty heart would one day hear the rhythm of two tiny heartbeats. But life has a gentle way of surprising you, exactly when you feel like nothing good is left. The city welcomed me with noise. Loud, restless, constant noise. It was nothing like the quiet rhythm of my village. Cars honked, people rushed, shops glowed with bright lights even late into the night.
Everyone seemed to be running towards something or running away from something. And somewhere among them, I was just a woman trying to breathe again. I found a small rented room near a busy market. It wasn't much, just a narrow bed, a window that opened to an alley, and walls thin enough to hear my neighbor's television every night. But it was mine, a space where no one asked questions, no one whispered behind my back, or no one looked at me with pity. For the first time in months, I could wake up without feeling judged. Beginning a new routine. Within a week, I found work at a community health center. It wasn't a big job, mostly helping organize files, guiding patients to rooms, and assisting with paperwork. But the place felt alive. People walked in with hope, fear, or confusion, and somehow helping them eased a part of my own pain. Every morning I arrived early. The smell of disinfectant, fresh paper, and warm tea in the staff room became familiar comforts. I met nurses who laughed loudly, pharmacists who always looked tired, and elderly patients who told stories even when no one asked. Work kept my mind busy, and busy felt better than broken. But healing is not a straight path. Some nights I still cried quietly, remembering the life I lost. Some mornings I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the tired eyes staring back. I was functioning, but I wasn't living. Not yet. The first time I met Daniel. The turning point came unexpectedly, like most important moments do. One afternoon, while sorting patient forms, a nurse rushed in and said, "The visiting specialist is here. We need a hand in the consultation room." A visiting specialist? I had no idea they were expecting one, but I followed her anyway. That's when I first saw him, Dr. Daniel. He was standing near the examination table, sleeves rolled up, reviewing some patient notes. He looked focused, but not cold. He carried a calmness in his expression, the kind you only find in people who truly care about their work. He looked up and offered a gentle smile. "You must be the new assistant. I'm Daniel." His voice was soft, not authoritative like some doctors. I introduced myself quietly, unsure why I suddenly felt nervous. We worked together that day, me handing him files, guiding patients in, answering questions, and watching him interact with people in a way that felt comforting. He didn't rush patients. He didn't dismiss their fears. He listened. Something about his presence felt different. He wasn't just a doctor. He was a good man. But at that time, I didn't let myself think too much about him. My heart was still learning how to stand steadily. A growing familiarity. Over the next few weeks, Daniel visited the center regularly, and each time we ended up talking, sometimes about work, sometimes about life. He noticed things I didn't expect anyone to notice. "You look tired today," he said once. "Did you sleep well?" I shook my head. Some nights are harder than others. He didn't push. He didn't ask intrusive questions. He simply nodded with understanding in his eyes, a quiet understanding that made me feel strangely seen. Another day, while I was filing documents, he said with a hint of concern, "You carry sadness like someone who has learned to hide it well." I didn't know what to say. No one had ever read me like that. "Everyone carries something," I eventually whispered. He smiled gently. "That is true, but you shouldn't carry it alone." I didn't reply, but his words stayed with me long after he left. The suggestion that changed everything. One evening, as we wrapped up for the day, Daniel approached me hesitantly. "May I ask something personal?" he said softly. My heart tightened, but I nodded. You mentioned once that you had trouble conceiving. I froze for a moment. I had not told many people, but Daniel had a way of listening that made confessions slip out before I even realized it. Yes, I whispered. Would you consider running some updated tests? He asked carefully. No pressure, just sometimes old diagnoses change. The thought frightened me. Hope frightened me. I don't want to be disappointed again, I admitted. He nodded with empathy. I understand, truly. But you deserve clarity, not fear. He was right, and I knew it. So a week later, with shaky hands and a trembling heart, I agreed. He guided me through every step, the blood tests, the scans, the consultations. He explained things slowly, gently, making sure I didn't feel overwhelmed. And then, one warm afternoon, he called me into his office. When I sat down, he took a breath and said, "You can conceive." The world stopped spinning for a moment. I stared at him, waiting for him to say, "but," waiting for something to break the joy rising inside me. But he continued with the same soft certainty. "You are completely capable of becoming a mother." Tears filled my eyes, the kind that falls silently, without permission. I covered my face with my hands and cried in a way I had not cried in years. Not out of sadness, but out of relief. Daniel gently placed the box of tissues in front of me and waited. He didn't touch my shoulder. He didn't speak. He let me feel the moment. When I finally looked up, he said something that changed the course of my life. "You are stronger than your past, and your future might surprise you." I did not know then what he meant, that the surprise waiting for me was not one heartbeat, but two. The quiet beginning of a new life. In the weeks that followed, we talked more. He asked about my dreams, I asked about his work. He told me about his travels, his struggles, his desire to help people heal. He never flirted, never crossed boundaries, but somehow his presence became a gentle light in my once dark days. And then one morning, when I woke up feeling nauseous and dizzy, I decided to take a pregnancy test, not expecting anything, not daring to hope too much. But the test showed 2 pink lines. I stared at it for minutes, covering my mouth, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I took another test, positive. Then another, still positive. My body, the same body that doctors once claimed might never hold a child, was carrying life. A whisper escaped my lips. "Thank you." I didn't tell Daniel immediately. I needed time to believe it myself, to let the miracle settle inside me. But eventually I told him. I will never forget the pure joy on his face. His smile was warm and real. He said softly, "You deserve this happiness." At that moment, I didn't know how complicated the happiness would become, or how deeply intertwined our lives would soon be. Because soon I would learn I wasn't just carrying a baby, I was carrying twins. And soon after that, I would discover Daniel's secret. A secret that would break me all over again and force me to walk away from everything. But that part of the story comes next.
The house feels different now. Sometimes it is full of noise, sometimes full of silence, but it is never empty the way it once was. Maybe because my heart is no longer empty. I wake up early these days. The twins sleep in their room, their blankets kicked off, their hair messy, their faces peaceful. I stand in the doorway and watch them breathe. They do not know how many storms came before them. They do not know how strong they made me. I walk to the kitchen and make tea. I look outside, at the small courtyard my father kept so clean all his life. I remember how he looked at me when I returned with the babies. No questions, no suspicion, only love, only acceptance. Sometimes I think this is what motherhood really is, not birth, not blood, but the courage to love with your whole heart. As the water boils, I think about my past, my old home, the woman I used to be, the things I survived. For a long time, I believed I had failed as a wife, failed as a daughter-in-law, failed as a woman. I carried those thoughts like heavy stones in my chest. But motherhood does something strange. It doesn't just give you love, it gives you clarity. The truth is simple. I was never the failure. I was simply in the wrong place with the wrong people. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, I sat alone in the living room. A soft rain was falling outside. The lights were dim. The house was quiet. I whispered to myself, I am enough. I always was. Those words felt like they unlocked something deep inside me. I felt lighter. I felt free. A few days later, something unexpected happened. My old mother-in-law called me again. This time, her voice was softer. She said, Your children, they look like him. I did not respond. There was nothing to say. Truth cannot be forced, and lies do not deserve explanations. She continued, He regrets many things. I breathed in deeply and said only, I hope he learns from them. There was a long pause. Then she whispered, almost pleading, Will you ever come back, even to visit? I closed my eyes. I remembered everything. The accusations, the silence, the loneliness. The day I was told to leave my own home. The life I lost. The life I rebuilt. No, I said gently. I am home. She wanted to say more, but she didn't. We hung up quietly. After the call, I walked to the twins' room. I touched their tiny hands. I listened to their soft breaths. And I knew I had made the right decision. Some mornings I take them to the old garden behind our house. They run around, laughing, falling, getting up again. Their joy fills the air. It fills the cracks inside me too. A neighbor once said, You are doing so much alone. Aren't you tired? I smiled and said, Yes, but I am also alive. There is a strength that grows in a woman who has lost everything and rebuilt from dust. I carry that strength with me, not loudly, not proudly, just quietly like a warm light inside my chest. Sometimes I imagine what I will one day tell the twins when they ask where their father is. I think I will say, He loved you, but he did not know how to love me, and that is why we built a new life, a better one.